welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker and I are poised and ready to go through the Atlantic Division. Justin, good morning. It is July the 2nd at like 9:30 a.m. It's we usually don't do the nice, not that this is that early, but the earlier podcast. So good morning to you, sir.
Yes, hi, good morning. It's the sun is shining. It's a beautiful weekend.
I know. I am going to the pool later. I'm excited.
Oh.
We're going to our my brother-in-law. His family is members at this prestigious swim club place in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So we get to be his guests and go swimming there. So it's pretty fun. We've gone a bunch of times, but it's like, members only. It costs them so much money to be members of this pool club for what, 3 months out of the year, like thousands of dollars just to do it. So, but it's beautiful. It's fantastic. And I don't mind riding on their coattails for that. So.
Right. Yeah. Do they have like cabana boys or people that bring you fresh drinks?
No, it's not. It's not quite like that. It's like a family pool kind of vibe, but like it's just high end people, I guess. But yeah, I do kind of feel like Jonathan Cheechoo with Joe Thornton. Do I deserve to be there? No, but will I? Yeah, I'll go.
Well said.
All right, on today's episode, we are going to go through all 8 teams in the Atlantic Division and just talk through what the offseason holds for these teams and what maybe they'll be looking for at the draft, in free agency, some of their own business that they have to solve, maybe some new coaches, as there has been, at least one of these teams have named, 2 of these teams have named new coaches. So, Let's dive in. We were going to start with your beloved Detroit Red Wings, sir, Justin. Let's do it.
Oh, wow. Yes,
wow.
I can't wait.
Oh, wow, as if we didn't plan it. Something is really weird with Cap Friendly with the Detroit Red Wings, though. No. Yeah, it's saying that they have a deadline cap space of $166 million. Something's weird with that number right now. I think probably like every team. No, it's like the Bruins have 11 million. The Red Wings have 166 million. The Sabres have 158 million. Something has gone horribly wrong with that calculation. That's why I just saw that number and was like, that's double the cap, more than double the cap.
That's too funny.
All right. Well, let's just get your first take with this team walking into the offseason. New coach, Derek Lalonde. Maybe start there.
Yeah, new coach coming in. I mean, listen, we know he's got a history with Yzerman. He was, part of John Cooper's squad for the last few seasons. And, obviously
Yzerman hired him.
Right, yeah, Yzerman hired him. And Yzerman's also no stranger to bringing in unknowns or new guys, right? Because he obviously he's never been a head coach in the NHL before. And I got to say, I kind of like that. I don't know too much about Derek Lalonde other than his actual coaching history. And he does, he has had some success in the ECHL, I'm sorry. And also with the AHL Iowa Wild, apparently he set the franchise record for most wins in a season and goals in a season, etc. But, I mean, look, there's obviously been a lot of head coaching changes lately, and you just see the same names recycled all the time. And sometimes, to me, that gets a little irritating because, for example, like I look at a guy like Paul Maurice, who just went to Florida, right? And we'll talk about him, a little bit later. But I get the sense like, hey, you know what? If they're not willing to take a chance on Andrew Brunette, who is a Jack Adams finalist, why recycle an old coach that has had zero success in the playoffs? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. So sometimes I like it when you bring in new faces, new people. So hopefully he's got that Stanley Cup pedigree still there from John Cooper and winning a couple.
Which theoretically, that's going to bring in new ideas.
Right.
And I also think that what it does mean is that Steve Yzerman maybe wants a little bit more control over the head coaching position. Bringing in your own guy, bringing in like a rookie head coach, kind of says that, I want to have some more input, and I know that this guy's going to allow for it. I think that that's fair to assume that Yzerman wants a little more control over that position that maybe he didn't get with Jeff Blashill, because Blashill was already there when he got there.
Right. Yeah. This is his first head coach after 3 years, and so that makes total sense, right? You want to finally have your guy at the helm, and I will say I'm excited about all the Gru and Minion memes that I've been seeing on Twitter already.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I actually haven't seen any of them, but I thought that.
Oh yeah, especially with the movie coming out here soon. It's just been rampant, and it's too funny. And now I've been seeing other people, taking Raymond, Larkin, their faces, and putting them on Minions now too, and it's fantastic.
Nice, that's perfect. I think it became more and more obvious to me that the Red Wings were going to hire Lalonde, because the longer the Tampa Bay Lightning were in the playoffs and other teams are hiring coaches, the Red Wings are just standing pat. It was like they're definitely waiting for him. There's no doubt about it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I am disappointed we won't see Larionov or Fedorov coaching, but I get it, right? I mean, obviously, we just heard about what's-his-face from the Flyers goaltender just literally trying to leave the KHL and gets arrested for ducking military service. So I'm sure there's a good reason why Yzerman was like, you know what, I'm just going to stay away from Russia right now and not rock that boat. And here we are.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting sidebar in the draft coming up.
Right.
How far will it make Russian players drop?
Exactly.
Okay, so the Red Wings, their composition right now, other than, of course, Seider and Lucas Raymond, you're looking at a lot of players who are going to become UFAs after this year, especially at the forward position. Really, you've got, in terms of significant forwards, you've got Rasmussen and Vrana, who won't become UFAs after this year. I mean, you're talking Larkin, Bertuzzi, Pius Suter, Oscar Sundqvist, Adam Ern, and on the defensive side, Jordan Osterley. There's some things happening, and Alex Nedeljkovic. I mean, even though this team has been quote unquote rebuilding, a lot of these guys might not even be here in 2 years.
Yeah, and I think that's the way Yzerman kind of wants it, right? He wants some cost control. He doesn't want to have to worry about being stuck to contracts long term. So I think he's okay with this, right? And I think management is too, because they're being patient. They're finally bringing in a new head coach, right? So obviously they're like, okay, cool, this is supposed to be the next step. And obviously this offseason, right, come July 1st or, whenever they can officially get extensions signed for these guys, Larkin is the priority, right? I mean, July 13th, you want Larkin to sign on the dotted line. You want an extension, because I think a lot of what Detroit maybe wants to do or is planning to do hinges on whether or not he's there long term. Because, for example, I look at like a guy like Andrew Kopp, right? News came out yesterday that he and Ryan Strome are going to test free agency and see what they can get out there. And while I still think Kopp is probably best suited to go back to New York and get to play alongside Panarin, you know what? I think, guys like him probably won't come to Detroit if Larkin's not going to be there long term, right? And obviously
you got to get him locked up.
Right, exactly. And two, what they do financially with some of these free agents also depends on how much, Larkin costs them. I mean, obviously, I think it's going to come in around $8 to $9 million, I think, to get him locked up long term. But is it worth it? Absolutely. For a hometown guy like that, your captain, he's one of those guys that are like heart and soul type of players. And, your other guys like Jacob Vrana, Lucas Raymond, they're going to be around for a while. And I think Vrana will, get an extension done next year. And, Tyler Bertuzzi obviously is a question mark. There's been rumors of him being on the trading block, and we'll see what happens with that. But I think, outside of that, really everything just really depends on Dylan Larkin and signing that extension.
I would be shocked if Larkin didn't sign an extension here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, why would you not? It's like John Tavares not wanting to play for Toronto, right? Your hometown team. And,
plus, you already play there. You already live here. You, like, and a nice thing, he's only 26 when his deal comes up. So that means that an 8-year deal takes him to, like, 33, 34 years old. It's not going to be something that is just, in 8 years, an $8.5 million deal is not going to be as massive as it appears now. It'll probably look more like a $6.5 million deal come that point. So in terms of cap percentage, I think it's a no-brainer for both sides. I mean, obviously Yzerman loves Larkin. He's grown, he's become a man here, and he's the captain. As long as he stays, he'll be the captain. And he's been leading this rebuild. And why would you want to? I mean, he's such a competitive guy. I mean, why would you want to leave in the middle of a rebuild and say, hey, you know what? I just abandoned my hometown team and just said, you know what? Now you got to reset again. For what? Like an extra $1 million maybe, or like right? If that. If he's and I guess the one thing that you can do if you're him is you say, yeah, I'm willing to commit here, but you're giving me a full no trade for all 8 years. That's what I'd be asking for. Yeah, and he would get it probably too. And so, but if he goes to like another team, like say a Colorado, New York Rangers or any of those other teams, Carolina, that are competitive right now, and he tries to sign a deal with them, he's going to be probably a second line center on most of those teams. He's not going to be the guy like he is here in Detroit. And so I think, from a competitive standpoint, he's better off staying here anyways. Yeah, that's true. And as more and more players develop and move up through the Red Wings organization, that still may be the case once they're a winning team, that he might just be a second line guy. But you know what? What does that even mean now? Like, he's a top six forward. He's going to get 18 minutes of ice time a night. Like, it's not as if he's going to get that second line is any less important than the first. Maybe in terms of power play, a top line center might get a little more time, but for now, he's the top line center, and the Red Wings really can use that in the draft and say, like, we're not desperate to go out and try to hit on a super high-end center. We can take the best player available if it's a defenseman, if it's a winger, because we know we have Dylan Larkin. So that, to me, is probably the most important thing about that. And I think he'll sign an extension rather quickly this summer. I don't expect to go into next season with him unsigned. No, I suspect if Yzerman's Yzerman, he's probably got something already in place. Yeah, because he can't sign that until, July 13th? Day of free agency. So, yeah. Any thoughts for where they're going to go in the draft? Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think they might want to go with a center, to be quite honest. But like you said, right, they don't have to do that. Their hands aren't tied to a centerman because they have Larkin. They have some, Michael Rasmussen. They have guys who can play in that middle six, but maybe not their true number 2 centers or 1B centers, whatever you want to call them. But they're guys who can fill in and play adequate, minutes as a centerman in that middle six. Now, obviously Pius Suter played, their second line center position this year, and that's not ideal for a team that, wants to get over that hump and be a playoff contender. And so, obviously if they can find somebody in the draft, that's great. But if not, again, they can find it through free agency. They can find it through trading. And, they can just take the best player available. So for me, I would probably go after a center if there's a good one there. But, again, your hands aren't tied. So take the best player available, keep building this team. You've got a good group of wingers too. And you know what? You might say, hey, you know what? I think Tyler Bertuzzi's going to walk. We're going to trade him. So let's go out and get a winger anyways to fill in for him in a year. Yep, that's true. And side note with Bertuzzi, I haven't heard any chatter about this and what I've listened to, but I got to think that maybe some of the reason why he's difficult to deal is because of his vaccination status. Like that was a sticking point this year. I don't know if it'll be as big of a deal next year, but it's definitely like, I feel like it's got to still be a thing. Some teams might just be like, no, we're not dealing with that. I wonder if that's something that's happening.
Could be.
Okay, yeah, the Red Wings have the 11th overall pick. So, man, it's
actually the 8th overall pick.
The 8th?
Yeah.
You know, I was just thinking, I can't believe they're picking outside the top 10. You know, Cap Friendly has them picking, what's happening here? Maybe this is wrong. Oh, here we go. I was looking at 2023. I don't know why. I'm a year ahead.
They're projecting already.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So they're picking 8th. There's some good players that'll be sitting there at 8th, but no matter who is there, no matter who they take, we're talking 2024, 2025 when that player becomes a relevant player on the Red Wings, most likely. So it's almost like, we're not. This draft isn't going to have much of an impact on next year.
Yeah, you would think so, but you never know with Yzerman. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, if Simon Edvinsson can come over and make this team next year, then holy smokes, that defense is going to look much different than it did just 2 years ago.
Oh my gosh, yeah, and then that also too opens up the door to move a guy like Filip Hronek out, who a lot of teams, I mean, honestly, would jump on, right? You got a right-handed defenseman at 24 who's costing you under $5 million a season, who can still produce offensively and has proven he can play top 2 minutes. Now, while his defensive side of his game still needs a little work, you can still pair him with a really good defensive defenseman, and boom, now you got yourself a good number 4, number 3 defenseman on your squad.
Yeah, I don't know that the Red Wings would move him. Why? Why would you move him when you've got, you're building that back end? I mean, he can be a part of it.
Well, I think, the big concern for Yzerman and part of the reason he brought in the coach he did is because he wants to see this team play stronger defense. And to me, Filip Hronek just doesn't fit that mold for what they're looking for. Okay. Yes, he can play offensively, but, that defensive style that Yzerman wants and that ability to shut down teams' top lines is just something I don't think Hronek has. And so, I think he's kind of one of those guys where, he can play second power play minutes. You can maybe put him on your third pairing. He's ideally suited for. And so, but I do think there are teams that are still willing to take a chance. And two, when you look at what Colorado did, I mean, their defensemen are just fast skaters. They move the puck quick, and, Hronek has a little bit of that. So maybe teams might be willing to pay a little bit more.
Yeah, but why do you want to give that up?
Oh, because you're rebuilding your defense, and maybe you don't see him as a long-term fit in that team. And I certainly don't. I just don't think the way he plays is going to be a long-term fit for this Detroit squad, especially when you got Moritz Seider taking up that top pairing. Then you've got, Edvinsson coming in, and, he's what? I think he's a left-handed shooter. I just don't like Hronek as a second pairing guy. I think he just doesn't have enough defensive to his game yet, and who knows, that might change, right, with a new
Lalonde,
coach.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that you're gonna allow Lalonde to have some time with some of these guys, especially the younger guys. Like, they drafted Hronek, like they've got 2 years and he's still in RFA. He's cost controlled at this point. So I think you're going to probably take a good, long, hard look, see if he can become the guy you want. And you're right. If he can't, then he's still a useful defenseman for another team who can play in a top 4, but maybe just needs the right defensive partner, and perhaps a defensive partner for him that is 20 years old isn't quite what you need.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Hronek's going to play on the top line, and he's probably going to get paired up. I think they're going to re-sign a guy like Mark Stahl, and you'll probably see him pair with him. And then also, too, the other thing is they've got Gustav Lidstrom coming through, who I think looks like a quality defenseman who could play, in that second pairing potentially. I think he's right now better suited for that third pair, but who knows how he develops, right? And so when you talk about needing that second line, guy to pair with him, Mark Stahl is probably going to, slot in, in that first or second pairing. And so to me, I don't know how comfortable I am with Mark Stahl at my top pairing. So I'd like to see the Wings go out and spend a couple bucks on, or maybe try to find another guy to fill in there on the cheap, like a Ben Sherratt or something.
You've got to think that they're going to be going after a defenseman in free agency, because they did lose Nick Leddy too, he was a big part of their defense last season.
Yeah, maybe they make a play for John Klingberg, right? I mean, obviously he's more offense than defense, and he kind of reminds me, Hronek reminds me a little bit of that, where he's, mostly offense and no defense. So, do you want another one of those guys in there? Maybe, especially if you pair him with a guy like Moritz Seider, I think that could potentially pay off pretty well. So, because, again, Seider is very responsible at his own end defensively. So
I just don't think that Yzerman's going out and is going to spend that money on a John Klingberg when they're just not ready. I don't
agree.
Think he's there.
I agree, and that's why I think a guy like maybe Ben Sherratt, for example, right, could come in. You could get him for $3-4 million and give him 3 years, and he can come in and fill in on that top line with Seider, and then you can put Mark Stahl with whomever you want on that second line.
It would be very tough to go from playing in the Stanley Cup Finals 2 years in a row to playing for a team that is most likely not going to make the playoffs.
Oh, right, sure. I agree. But you know what? I think given his playoff performance, I think his value kind of dropped just a little bit. And so, where does he fit in terms of other teams' plans, right? And is he going to get the type of money and term that he's looking for? And maybe he's better suited to go to a team that's right there on the bubble and needs a few pieces to get over that hump into the playoffs.
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts for the Red Wings? Goaltending? I mean, you're Alex Nedeljkovic, 1 year left. There's been some talks about even him getting moved. But he's a UFA at the end of this year, so you could be hitting the reset button here from the goaltending position very soon.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've got Sebastian Cossa in the Wings, and he was a guy that they moved and traded up in the first round last year to get. He's looked really good in the WHL the last couple of years, and he was stellar in the playoffs for the Edmonton Oil Kings, and so is he the long-term option? Maybe. I think right now he looks like it. But, again, goaltenders are so finicky, so hard to really get a beat on early on when they're that young, unless they're true number ones like your Marc-Andre Fleury's, right, where you have no doubt that they're going to be successful. But when you have to develop them like these guys do,
maybe. 15th overall pick, you're definitely hoping that he pans out. Probably not this next year. He'll go to the AHL, I think, this next year, and then again he'll probably be down there for a couple of years, would be my guess.
So this could be a situation where maybe you see the Wings go out and go and get a veteran guy, right? Bring somebody in, and who knows? Maybe they take a swing at a guy like Darcy Kemper or Jack Campbell. I mean, Campbell played at U of M, so
Yep. I have heard that tossed around that maybe Campbell would go to Detroit because Detroit might be willing to pay him a little bit more. They might be willing to pay that $5 million dollar amount. The Leafs just aren't going to pay him that, and it's unfair and fair at the same time. If he had the season that he had early on this year, all year long, absolutely pay him the money. But I think the Leafs are looking at it like, you haven't been able to stay healthy. You've never played a full season. You had some very wild up and down times of the season. And yes, he was good in the playoffs. I wouldn't say he was great in the playoffs. They didn't lose because of him, but they didn't really win any of those games because of him either. Not that he didn't make saves to help them to win, but he didn't go out and steal any games. So
no, I kind of look at him like Darcy Kemper, right? Was to Colorado, because they didn't win any series because of him, but he didn't cost them any games either, right? Made some good saves when he had to.
He definitely cost them some games. He had some bad goals in a few of those.
I mean, yeah.
But when you're playing 20 plus games, I mean, I know he didn't play much in the conference finals, but I mean, obviously they're going to go out and they're going to get some other goalie. It'll just be, it'll be interesting to see if they do decide to go a little younger. Maybe they do give opportunities to some of the kids in their system. Or do they go out and maybe they re-sign Nedeljkovic if they like what he's doing and they're able to get him at this $3 million range. It just depends on if he, wants to stay in Detroit. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, we'll see how he does this year. And obviously, if he's winning a lot of games and playing a lot of minutes, he might say, hey, you know what, this is where I can be long-term and be the number one guy. And, maybe he wants to see it through.
All right. That's the Detroit Red Wings. 25 minutes on the Red Wings. We could just stop the podcast now and well, let's move on to the Leafs. We'll just start the first two teams being the teams that both of us root for. I'll give my 2 cents here walking into the off season for the Maple Leafs. I posit that if you look at the way that the Tampa Bay Lightning won the Cup, you look at the Colorado Avalanche, so which are the 2 most recent teams to win the Cup. Well, they have one very specific thing in common. I guess 2. They a lot of their top guys was through the draft. I mean, no team has every player through the draft, but a lot of their top guys were through the draft. You had Landeskog, McKinnon, Makar. All those guys are through the draft. Rantanen. And then on the flip side with Tampa, you've got Kucherov, you got Hedman, you have Stamkos and Vasilevsky. With the Leafs, you've got Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Morgan Riley. They're building it through the draft as well. And I think the mistake that a lot of teams make is they go, we lost a couple years in a row. Like, I don't think you can look at the last 5 years of the Leafs losing in the first round and say all 5 of those years they should have won. No, like they were probably the favorites to win twice. And even then, I'd say for sure once against Montreal, they were the favorites. Should have won that one. That was a disaster. Other than that, they've lost to the Stanley Cup finalists 3 of the last 4 years. Like, it's not as if they're losing to a bunch of scrub teams. And the one time they should have won it was to a team that went to the Stanley Cup Finals. So I don't think you should look at this and say, we have to trade Matthews, Tavares, Martin. Like, you're not going to trade Matthews, but like one of those big 4, we have to shake it up. The Tampa Bay Lightning did not go and trade any big names after getting swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Colorado Avalanche lost in the second or first round how many years in a row before they broke through this year? I don't think that it's you have to be able to, like, you got to go and win 1 round. And then the next year, maybe you'll win 2 rounds. And then the next year, you'll win 3 rounds. I don't think that it has to be that linear. And I think that the Colorado Avalanche proved that. I think that probably the most logical thing is to just come into next year with those big 3 or with the big 4 and try to do it again. I think your chances of losing are probably pretty low. Like, you're gonna break through eventually with this group, and I think that it's much easier and a better plan to build around what you have, trust what you've built, as opposed to saying, let's just trade one of them just for trade's sake. Like, yeah, obviously Nylander's the name that's been thrown out. Let's just trade Nylander just to kind of change the culture or change this or that. But no matter who you trade William Nylander for, you are probably not getting a guy who is going to be a point-per-game player back in return. I mean, he had 34 goals this last year. That is going to be almost impossible to just go out and find. So I don't think that you deal Nylander. I think you just get away from all these old, slow players that they've been signing that are, they're Toronto boys, blah, blah, blah. No, just you got to go out and you have to acquire the Michael Buntings and the David Camps. And I think that they made great progress last year in free agency as opposed to prior years where they're trying to pull in these older veterans because they felt like they needed some leadership. I don't think you need that leadership now. I think you've got it up front. I think you've got veterans in the back end. Now you just need to go out and acquire speed. And then, a guy like Wayne Simmons, you need to go bye-bye. Bye-bye, Wayne Simmons. I think that it was a good thing that Jason Spezza retired. They need to get away from that type of player, and they need to go out. It's fine if somebody is a little tougher like a Wayne Simmons, but they've got to be able to play too. And Wayne Simmons just can't play.
No, I agree. I will tell you though. So there's two big things, right, that I think those other two teams you mentioned, Colorado and Tampa, had that Toronto doesn't. And I think at some point you kind of have to step back and look and say, hey, you know what? Can we do one of these things, right? So the first one for Colorado is they had the luxury of having cap space. They got lucky because McKinnon's on such most underpaid player in the history of this league. His contract's going to essentially double when he re-signs. Landeskog, Rantanen, these guys were all on pretty cheap deals. Obviously, Rantanen getting his extension, and same with Landeskog. But, they had cap space to burn. And so when they were able to find a guy like Nazem Kadri for essentially, again, they traded for, Tyson Barrie, but, they were able to and Kerfoot, but they were essentially able to absorb a cap space because Kadri wasn't traded because of his suspensions or that he cost his teams, potentially playoff series, et cetera, all that other crap. He was traded because it was cost, effective for this team to move him because they needed help on the back end and they didn't have any cap room, right? So
I disagree 100%. They said that they had to trade him. He got suspended 2 years in a row in the playoffs for doing something stupid. It was just they couldn't keep it anymore. Kerfoot for Kadri, not super fair straight up. If Barrie had worked out in Toronto, I think it would have been a fine deal.
Sure, but regardless, a team like Colorado takes advantage of something like that because they have cap space.
Sure, yeah.
Now a team like Tampa Bay, they've been successful because they've been willing to deal those first-round picks to bolster that third line because they needed that depth, something that Toronto is missing, in that third and fourth line, to get that extra scoring from guys like Nick Paul and Barclay Goodrow and get that chip in, third. Essentially that's what won them those two Stanley Cups was having such a great third line both times. And so, obviously, look, it worked out for Tampa, it worked out for Colorado. And so I think at some point, if you're Toronto, you really have to step back and look and say, hey, you know what? We don't have a ton of cap space, and we're probably not going to have a ton of cap space anytime soon. So, if we're not willing to deal or shake up the roster by trading a guy like William Nylander, which I wouldn't either because I agree with you, they're not going to get the return back for a guy like that. So you have to be willing to move those first-round picks. And, Dubas wasn't willing to do that this year. And, sometimes you can say, okay, cool, I understand it because you need to restock the cupboards, the prospect pool. But at the same time, you have to realize, we got to go out there and win now because they've only got 3 more seasons left of, Mitch Marner's contract, John Tavares' contract. Now, do these guys re-sign? I think, obviously Marner's going to get re-signed, but Tavares, I don't know. I think he'll re-sign, but who knows, right?
Yeah, by the end of that deal, Tavares is 34 years old. That's just
right. And Austin Matthews too. Yes, I think he'll re-sign, and I think they'll basically write a blank check for 20%. But at that point, who knows where the cap's going to be at? So you might, your window right now might only be these 2 years because Austin Matthews might want that full 20%. And who could blame him, right?
No one's ever gotten that number. No,
I agree. I don't.
Not even Connor McDavid is getting that number.
No, but I think Austin Matthews is going to go and say, hey, you know what? I want to make more than Connor McDavid, so he's going to get at least $13 million on his new deal. So, is that going to, is the cap going to go up enough to really, kind of offset that raise? So
it'll depend. It'll depend on how willing he is to I feel like, hey, is he going to be willing to take a little bit of a discount? Like, could he go command $14 million? Yes. But should he sign for 12 times 8? Yes. I mean, 12 times 8 is still almost 100 million. I think you probably see the first 100 mil. Well, no, it wouldn't be 100 million. That'd be
96, but it's pretty damn close.
I think you probably go. Well, oh wait, is that what the 12.5? That was 12.5 times 8. That's 100 million, right? Is that what McDavid signed for?
Yeah, that's 100 million.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm sure that he's getting more than that. Probably 13, but it's just you're really handicapping the rest of your team. So it kind of comes down to like, are you willing to take a little bit of a cut so that your team can win? That's that obviously that's what it'll come down to. But we'll see what happens there. It's going to be real tough to. I mean, Tavares, you're not going to have 3 guys making over $11 million. So Tavares will be, he'll be gone at the end of this deal unless he's willing to sign a much smaller deal moving forward after that point. But I think the Leafs do have a lot of guys coming up that can make their roster. Nick Abruzzi looked solid at the end of the year. He's going to get a full training camp after he just came from playing college hockey. He'll get a full training camp. Rodion Amirov, who the Leafs took in the first or the second round? First round in 2020, 15th overall. He has looked good. I mean, granted, Russian, we're always concerned now about those Russian players. Will they want to come over? Can they? So that'll be a question mark. But then you've got Topi Niemela, who the Leafs took third round in 2020. Like, really, their 2020 draft has the potential to be monstrous with him, Amirov, and Hervonen. All those guys look like they could be key contributors to a team down the road. Can one of them make the team? Can Nick Robertson finally crack the roster and make the team? And so they definitely have the pieces down in the minors to be able to come up, compete for roster spots next year. And I think that's what you want. Like, this team has kind of lacked that, instead of allowing for young players to come and have opportunities in the lineup, they've had guys like Simmons and Clifford and Spezza that have taken roster spots, and it's just been a lot. I think that it's been good for players' development down in the minors, but it is time to give those players a longer look, actually have spots available for guys to fight for, where, like, when you're like, yeah, I mean, we'll if somebody outplays somebody, we'll definitely have them make the team. That's not entirely true, because sometimes it just is a salary cap decision. Well, that guy can go to the minors and that guy can't, so he's going to the minors. And it's not necessarily because one is better than the other. So I think when you leave that roster spot open, it creates true competition for that spot, and I think you'll see one or two players kind of break through and maybe become more regular players on the Leafs, which is what they need, because those guys are cost controlled. They're making far less than $1 million a year, and that will allow them, come trade deadline time, to have more available cap space to make a move.
Yeah. Now, for me, I think when you talk about cap, right, the biggest concern for me with this team, I think they've got a great group of forwards. They just need to round out that bottom six a little bit more. They've got a good set of defensemen who can get it done, but the goaltending, right, is the concern. And do they have cap to bring in a starter, get Jack Campbell back? Who knows? Yeah,
do you go Jack Campbell? Maybe it's maybe you go calling to Darcy Kemper, say, hey, come help us win a cup too.
Yeah, but they don't have money to get a guy like Darcy Kemper.
Oh, they have.
Because I know
they have about $6 million in cap space right now. I know.
Yeah, but he's going to want at least $5 million now. I mean,
yeah, it's true.
And you can't afford that, so you have to try to. I mean, you got to try to move Mrazek's contract. Maybe find a team that's willing to take that on. And that's all of it. Is they're either going to buy out Mrazek or they're going to have to move him. Which he does have a no movement. He has a 10-team no trade, so it's not as if you can ship him off to Arizona. Yeah, I mean, a buyout seems likely, right? but obviously with his contract too, it's not like he earned a lot of the money up front on that contract either. So he's definitely, earning most of it in these last 2 years. I mean, if you buy him out, you'll save 2.76 and then 2.96 next year. But after that, it's going to cost you 1.4 a season. And then hopefully in 2 years, right, escrow and all that stuff. So maybe you don't worry about it as much then. But
here's the thing for me. I also look at it and I go, the last 3 seasons, he's played all right. He's played pretty good, other than this season. Can you look at it and just say, you know what, we are just going to come back with him as one of our goalies, and we're going to try it again, because you signed him to a 3-year deal, and yes, year 1 didn't go as planned. He was also injured like more than half the year, so maybe you just give the guy another shot, because that $3.8 million, if he can be a decent goalie, you can figure that out. And then next year, if you need to, you could definitely dump his contract with 1 year left. You don't even have to buy him out. You probably can just move him. And then maybe he ends up working out for you, though. Maybe he ends up being a good backup goalie, and you can stomach it, and you can have a 1A, 1B situation.
I don't mind bringing him back and giving him another opportunity, but what I do mind is letting him be the only guy there, right? I think they need another another 1A, 1B guy there for him. But again, that comes down to cost control, right? How many of these guys are out there for, $3 million where you can afford to sign them? That's going to be the tough part, right? Is finding that guy. Maybe you can convince Braden Holtby to come in there and give him $3 million, $4 million in, a couple of years. And maybe he says, okay, cool. You know what? I think they got a good shot to win now. But there's not too many of those guys out there. So that's going to be the challenge for Toronto.
Yeah. Or do you go, maybe you trade for an Ilya Samsonov, or a Georgiev, whose value is low right now, but you could definitely see, a reason why he could still be a starting goaltender in this league. The Rangers were horrible defensively for most of the year, and yes, Shesterkin was unbelievable, but I don't think you're not trying to go out and sign Shesterkin right now. Like, you're not going to find that, so you don't have delusions of grandeur. But Georgiev, in a better defensive system that Toronto has, could succeed. And he's cost controlled. You could probably get him for around the same number that he's signed for previous, which is about $2.5 million. And then you've got a guy who maybe becomes your goaltender. I think all of this, though, there is one issue, is that there's a lot of just almost like drama with the goaltending position in Toronto. There's no steadying effect from the goaltending position, and that's really what you want. That's why the Lightning are so successful, because there's such a we have Vasilevsky. We don't even have to worry about anything.
I'll tell you who I go after if I'm Toronto. This guy's cheap. I think the team will move him quickly for not much at all, because they have 3 starting goaltenders right now. I go after James Reimer in San Jose.
Ooh,
they've
bring
got
back Reimer.
Kaapo Kokkonen, Aiden Hill, James Reimer there. So they've got a 3-headed monster that obviously they don't want to go in. They've got a new GM that's probably willing to deal. So I think James Reimer would be somebody you could bring back. He's, outside of that Boston series, which wasn't his fault. I think the fans would welcome him back. And
yeah, but I don't know. If you went in with Mrazek, Reimer for next year, I don't know if that's strong enough. I don't know.
I don't disagree with you, but I would try to move Mrazek, but I think Reimer would be a good option for Toronto to bring in.
All right.
I still think he's got enough to be a 1B there. So
yeah, I could. I can see the 1B. Yeah, I like it. I don't think that any Leafs fan would have a problem with Reimer being a part of the organization. Absolutely not. I think everybody loved James Reimer. All right, well, let's scoot on from the Leafs. Now that we've spent 45 minutes on the Leafs and the Red Wings, we'll cruise through the rest of these Atlantic teams. let's go to the Boston Bruins. They got a new head coach, Jim Montgomery, coming in, and I'm wondering what he's going to change with this team. Other than I think maybe it's going to be a little more player friendly. What do you think?
Yeah, I that wouldn't surprise me. I think that's part of the reason why they wanted to make a change, right? Obviously, a new coach, new system. You kind of, sometimes you feel like teams are rebuilding when they bring in new coaches, but this is not the case with this team right now. They are in definite win now mode. So, Jim Montgomery is a guy who has a proven track record. He's a veteran coach, but he is also too a little bit more player friendly. So, maybe that might, attract some free agents. It might bring some guys back. I mean, the rumor is Bergeron's going to sign a 1-year deal, and I've already heard rumors now that Bruce Cassidy's gone, David Krejci might come back.
Yeah.
Who knows if there's any truth to that, but I mean, that would just be gangbusters for them if he came back.
Yeah, it's so interesting now because, of course, Pastrnak, you were talking about underpaid players. Pastrnak at $6.6 million. I mean, he is due for a fat raise. He's definitely going to get over $10 million. He's a consistent 40-goal scorer every year. This guy's going to get $10 million. So it'll be interesting to see if Boston is willing to. I guess when I say 10, it might be 9.5 and try to match him with Charlie McAvoy, but he's going to get paid. And the Bruins, are they willing to do that with Pastrnak? And is he willing to sign with the Bruins long term, or does he go and find a new home?
Yeah, I think he's going to test free agency. Not that I think he might go sign somewhere else, because I think as long as the challenge is going to be finding a top center to replace Bergeron, and because Bergeron's going to play it 1 year at a time, and so if there's nothing there, I think he's going to wait it out and see what their plan is, right? Because if they don't win a cup now, if they don't have a replacement for Bergeron after the season, Pastrnak might be like, hey, you know what? I don't want to sit here and go through a rebuild. I'm 26, 27. No, thank you. I'm going to go off to a team like, I don't even know where he would sign and who's willing to give him that money. But maybe it's a Detroit, right? Maybe he goes to Detroit. They have some money and they could sure use a guy like him. I mean, who's going to say no to a 40-goal scorer? So
yeah. And there's not a team in the league that wouldn't try to sign him.
Right.
Now, whether they could cap-wise, that's another question. But, I mean, and the Bruins can afford to sign that. But, yeah, it's one of those, it's been a sweetheart deal while you've had it, and it's coming up. And that's going to be big. Do you like... Hampus Lindholm is now signed long-term. McAvoy's signed long-term, and so is Brandon Carlo. It's really, I mean, is it going to come down to goaltending again with this team? Linus Ullmark, Jeremy Swayman. We're basically walking into the same exact situation as we had this last year.
Yeah, I mean, from a goaltending perspective, I love what they have back there. That combination of Ullmark and Swayman is phenomenal. To me, if I had to pick a 1A and 1B combo, this would probably be it, right? But the problem is Swayman's got a new deal coming, and he looks like the 1A to Ullmark's 1B. So, if Ullmark's making $5 million, what do you think Swayman's going to want, right? He's probably going to want 6.
Yeah,
so,
well, and yes, Ullmark was a UFA, so the money's a little different, but you're probably looking at Swayman getting at least close to that, somewhere around in the neighborhood of $5 million. It's kind of becoming the number for goaltenders that aren't the best goaltenders ever, but they're very good. Outside of your, Vasilevsky, Price, those guys.
Right. And so, really what it boils down to for me is I look at this defense and all the big money they're spending there. I think that's where you're going to see some change maybe this year. Whether it's a guy like Derek Forberg, Mike Riley, or Grzelcyk, getting moved at some point. I think one, if not two of those guys are going to have to go.
Yeah, 100%.
To make some room to sign a guy like Swayman and still have money around to bring Pasta back, assuming that he wants to stay there. So, listen, from a defensive side and goaltending, I think they're okay, even if they had to stay with what they have. and try to figure it out next offseason, I think they'd be okay. But, a full season with a healthy Hampus Lindholm, I think is going to be phenomenal for this team. He and McAvoy are just going to, run rampant on that blue line, 25-plus minutes each. McAvoy, I think, to me, was probably one of the more underrated defensemen this year. I would have probably put him in my top 3, to be quite honest, this year. As far as defensemen, I think what he did and the way he played with no defensive partners and, a lack of depth at that forward group, I think he was phenomenal for this team. And so, obviously he's not my Norris pick, but I would have given that to Yossi. But I think besides Makar and Yossi, I think he was number 3 for me. Okay.
I when it comes to the Bruins, I look at this team and I see a team that's going to make the playoffs. I see a team that could win a round. I don't know if we're looking at a team that is going to win the cup.
No.
Win one for the Gipper, win one for Bergeron. I just don't see it. I don't like almost $4 million to Nick Foligno right now. The Jake DeBrusk situation, maybe that all gets settled because of the new head coach. I know that him and Cassidy had a big issues with each other, but we'll see if they have to still trade Jake DeBrusk. Like, does he still want out, or is he willing to stay? He signed the deal to stay, but from my understanding, when he signed that deal, it was not an indication of I want to stay in Boston. It was an indication of I'm willing to sign a deal so that it makes me easier to move, so that a team isn't wondering how much I'm going to be signing for. So I wonder. And he was really good for Boston. He was really good, very important down the stretch too. Scored 25 goals, and when this team had some injuries, he really stepped up.
And he gives them the flexibility, right, to move Pasta off that first line and put him on that second line. And but obviously the problem is, right, without a Bergeron, without David Krejci, Charlie Coyle's your top center, and that's just not a recipe for success, especially when you think long term, right? Especially with Pasta and DeBrusk, 2 years from now too. All these guys going into UFA, they could implode really, really quick here. So
and don't forget, Brad Marchand is going to miss the first little bit here of the season. The first, I think it's, oh gosh, what is it? Who is it? McAvoy's going to be out for 6 months, right?
Yep.
And Marchand's going to miss the first 2 months of the season, and even Matt Grzelcyk, he may be out for a little while to start the season. Mike Riley had a right ankle tendon repair and removal of bone fragments. That's a 3-month recovery, so we'll see if he's ready to go for the start of the season. There's a lot of big injuries that they're facing moving into the season, so that's not going to help the start of their season. They may be in a little bit of a hole. You talk about 25 minutes a night. Well, Hampus Lindholm might need to play 30 for this team until McAvoy gets back. So that is what maybe is going to be unfortunate about this year. Can they get them? They're like the Penguins. Remember the Penguins walking into this year? We said, can they keep themselves in playoff contention by the time Malkin and Crosby get back? They were able to do that. Can the Boston Bruins do that too? That'll be the big question. Let's go Buffalo Sabres. 3 first-round picks headed into the draft, and for once, we don't have a new head coach for the Sabres in the offseason, do we?
Hallelujah. My goodness.
Yeah, nobody got fired at the end of the year.
Right?
It's been the same guy for a whole year. It's amazing. Don Granaut. Okay, so where do you see the Sabres? I think they're picking, they're picking 28th, they're picking 16th, and they're picking 9th. Any chance that the Sabres try and move up in the draft, you think?
Move up, huh? Wow.
Packaging a couple of those to move up, or are we just talking we're just going to blanket this thing and make all 3 picks?
You know what? It wouldn't shock me if, say, for instance, Montreal goes out and they do take Slafkovsky with that number 1 pick, and Shane Wright, Logan Cooley are sitting there prime at number 2, and New Jersey is still willing to deal, then maybe, yes, you could see them trading at number 9, trading another one of those first rounders, and maybe throwing in, a 3rd or 4th round pick. They could potentially, or maybe throw in a 2nd round pick for next year, because they have 3 of those as well. Maybe you can make that move, right? It's not out of the question. And really, I mean, if you were able to get a Logan Cooley or a Shane Wright to come in and be your number 1 guy of the future, that's not bad. I mean, Don't get me wrong. I like Middlestat. I like what they have, but I think one of these 2 guys would be much, much better than what they've got right now.
Now the question is New Jersey are they going to be open to just acquiring picks, or are they going to want a player?
Yeah, that's the good question, right? I do think they are kind of in that win now mode. They think their window
or
is
at
starting
least
to open.
Get better this season. Like,
right.
They're not looking 3 years down the road to be better. They want to be better this season and compete for a playoff spot for sure.
Right, and from a player standpoint, right, they don't really have a lot of guys, I mean, that they can really deal. Or I shouldn't say that they want to deal, right? I mean, obviously they'd love to give, Kyle Okposo or maybe get rid of Jeff Skinner somehow, but New Jersey's not going to take either one of those guys. So, when you look beyond that, really it's Alex Tuck, Casey Middlestat, Tage Thompson, but Buffalo's not dealing those guys. They'd be stupid to.
One guy that I could see including in a deal, I think maybe you would do like maybe the 9th overall and the 28th overall plus, I think it was 28th overall is where they're picking. Was that right? 28th overall, and Victor Olofsson. Victor Olofsson would be a reasonable, like, he's a goal scorer. He's not prolific. He's like a right at 20 goal type of guy. He can put up 45, 50 points in a season, and you're going to have to sign him to probably around $5 million a year. He's 26 years old. I think you can find a way to where he could be a guy that could be jettisoned if you were bringing in a Shane Wright, or, if you loved a guy down there. Or I should say
I guess,
there.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't mind that idea. And I don't think they'd have to move 2 first rounders if they include Olofsson in that deal. I think you could probably get away with a 2nd round pick. 3 pieces really.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I don't mind it. I think it's not a bad idea at all, really. And if you're New Jersey, right, you kind of like that too, because you are looking for wingers. You want more scoring on the wing, and so
plus you still get a 9th overall pick. Like, you're not moving down to like into the 20s. Yeah, I think you're right. If you were to go the 9th overall pick plus a 2nd round pick plus Olofsson, I think that would get it done.
Yeah, I think both sides would be happy and get what they want. And, I mean, look, they could bring in, I would probably take, Shane Wright, and he's, NHL ready. So you could plug him in, on your 2nd, 3rd line right now and see what he's got. But
I don't know. If you're Buffalo, I think you probably send him back to juniors. I think that's what I'm kind of hearing, is that Shane Wright will probably, whoever drafts him is going to draft him knowing he's going to go back to juniors because he missed a whole year of juniors. That's what I've been hearing.
I'm not opposed to that anymore, to be quite honest. I mean, look, when Owen Power got drafted number 1 overall and went back to Michigan, I said, you know what? Hey, I like this. I think that's the smart move, because stop rushing these guys in unless they're generational talents like Connor McDavid, obviously. But I think from a physicality standpoint, and I think from just an IQ standpoint, you want these guys to develop and get that confidence that they can dominate, because once they come into the NHL, they're not going to dominate like they did in juniors, and you don't want to ruin that psyche.
Right.
So you want them mentally ready to compete.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I think if you take Shane Wright, he's probably not coming into your roster. You could, but it's going to be much better for him to go and be dominant as opposed to playing on your 3rd or 4th line.
Right. And they're still, I mean, let's be honest, with Craig Anderson and Dustin Tokarski, or, whomever plays that backup position, I mean, the rumor is that they're going to go out and get somebody else to play with Craig Anderson, because they still want to send, Luukkonen back to the AHL to play 60 games there.
Yep.
So they're not like in win now mode, or they're not like close to where they think they can compete for a playoff spot. So why rush a guy like Shane Wright too?
Yep, that's right. All right. Well, either way, if the Sabres decide to just keep all their picks, they're going to have their draft day. I mean, they've got 4 picks in the first 41 picks, so they'll have a pretty exciting draft day there in Montreal. All right, let's move to the Florida Panthers. They have no first round pick, no second round pick. They have no first round pick for the next 3 years. So in terms of the draft, they have certainly sold out their capital in terms of for a win now mode. They won 1 round for the first time since 1996, and now they find themselves with a new head coach in Paul Maurice, which I absolutely love that move. I'm so excited to see what Paul Maurice does walking into this team, how he can take the best offensive regular season team we've seen in the last 30 years and what he can do with them to get them playoff ready and how that'll change. I'm very curious.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, he had Winnipeg playoff ready when they were, still competing a couple of years ago. Their brand of hockey was good for the playoffs, but now he's got more talent, right? He's got
much more,
a lot more offensive firepower to work with, and he could potentially have Claude Giroux in there as well. Rumor is, I think they're still trying to work something out with him, but obviously he's got to take some sort of discount. So really with this team, right, even more than the head coach, because I still think regardless who's at the helm there, I think they're still going to be successful. Now, again, I agree with you. I think it comes down to can whatever head coach is there get them playoff ready, but to me it's going to be what they do with Sergei Bobrovsky this season. Is he still there come, September, October, or does he get moved at some point during the summer, and how much do they have to eat? Because I think cap space is a concern for this team, especially considering that we've got Jonathan Huberdeau's contract coming up. Mackenzie Weegar's going to need a big raise. And so it'll be interesting to me to see if they make that move to try to free up some cap space to keep these guys long-term.
And they're going to actually have to pay Spencer Knight something.
Right.
Yeah, when I look at this next year, I really see a year where, it was genius to bring Paul Maurice in, because I think you come in with the mindset that, we must win the cup. This is our cup year, because Huberdeau's up, Hornqvist will be gone, and, I think maybe you could go into this year and keep Bobrovsky, but you'd have to move him next year. So I think you're coming into this knowing that you've got to win. I think there's a lot of pressure, but I think Paul Maurice is the perfect man to kind of take that pressure and use it and help this team to advance to new heights. It'll just be interesting to see if they can have the same type of depth that they have had over the last 12 months, where they basically have had a second line playing on their fourth line. I don't know if that'll be the case next year.
No, I think a guy like, for example, Patrick Hornqvist, I think whether or not he's moved or he's bought out, I think he won't be there next year, because you don't want to pay a guy $5.3 million to play on your fourth line, right? So you're going to open up some spots there. I think, getting a full season of a healthy Anton Lundell is going to be phenomenal for this team. But again, Mason Marchment, he's not going to be back this season. I don't think they can afford to keep him and Giroux. So one of those guys have got to go. And I think, if you're Florida, you'd probably rather keep Giroux. He was phenomenal on that top six for them. And so obviously Joe Thornton won't be back either to play the occasional game. So I think there's going to be some changes, like you said, on that bottom line, that bottom six, 4 guys there on that forward group are going to be a little bit different. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the draft, there's not much going for the Panthers. They're just going to have to try and do this through free agency at this point. They've already drafted all their guys.
Yeah, and those bottom 6 guys are easy to find in free agency. I don't think there's any shortage of those. So they should be able to get some guys relatively cheap that can still produce a little bit.
All right, yeah, and let's not forget Mason Marchment. He was almost a point-per-game player playing on the third line. Unbelievable. So, he's going to go somewhere, and he's not going to get a crazy contract, but if he can go and produce that again somewhere else, some other team is going to be very lucky. All right, let's go to the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens have 2 first rounds, 2 second, 3 thirds, 3 fourths, a fifth, a sixth, and 2 seventh round picks. They have a ton of picks in this upcoming draft, 14 to be exact so far. Man, I am excited to see what they'll do, because I think there's a lot that could happen. I think Jeff Petrie could be moved. I want, obviously we don't know if Carey Price has played his last NHL game. I think there's a good chance that he's done. And they went out and they acquired Evgeny Dadonov. But there's a lot of potential moves. Paul Byron, he could be moved. You've got Mike Hoffman, who could be moved. There's been rumors out there for Josh Anderson, who would fetch a pretty penny. It's all just going to depend on what this Montreal team wants to do moving forward and how quickly they think they can win again, right? Like, I just don't see this team being a winner for a little while, though.
No, I agree. I think it's all about giving guys like Cole Caulfield, Nick Suzuki time and opportunity, right? Give them the minutes to play each night, see what they can do, and really just kind of continue to mold those guys and continue to draft, right? Like you mentioned, they've got a ton of draft picks coming up in this year's draft. So, do they maybe move some of those too? Like next year, for example, right? Maybe you move that Calgary pick this year and move into the first round next year, because the first round next year is going to be loaded at the top. So, maybe you wait and cash in then instead of this year. But either way, I think, they're going to have a lot of opportunities to bring in young talent and see if they can develop them. So don't rush it. Maybe they go tankathon and so that they can get that number one pick next year again. And, I doubt it's going to happen 2 years in a row, but, we've seen Edmonton do it. So who knows?
That is true. But did the rule start this year, or is it starting next year where you can't win the draft lottery twice? I think that was this year. That's this year.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, that's this year. So I don't think the Montreal Canadiens can win the draft lottery again for 5 years.
Interesting.
So it's going to be.
Right, we'll see.
What's going to be interesting is when there's like 6 or 7 teams that are up for the draft lottery that can't win it. So you just have all these, like, it could get weird. I don't know if is it that you can't have the first overall pick multiple times, or is it you just purely can't win in the lottery?
I don't know. Let me Google that.
Yeah, Google it. Yeah, do some research. I'll filibuster here for a minute on the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah, I think there's a lot of players that the Habs could move to acquire those draft picks, and I think there is. You're right. There's every reason to look forward to that 2023 first round and try to acquire as many picks in that as you can. I think that Jonathan Drouin could be a great target to move. I mean, he's a UFA at the end of this year. Has everything worked out the way that they were hoping? Absolutely not. Jonathan Drouin had up and down, an up and down career in Montreal, but he ended the season on LTIR. He's had the anxiety stuff that he had the year before. I think there's some risk behind him, but bringing him in for one more year, maybe as if Montreal eats half that salary and suddenly he's at $2.75 million cap hit. If you can bring him into your third line, maybe your top 6, but not have to rely on him completely, I think it'd be a great move. And you might be able to add him for a second round pick because of the baggage that he brings. He might be a great risk worth taking. Maybe now it's going to be hard for a team like the Leafs to make a deal like that with Montreal, maybe, but he may be a great fit on the wing for the Leafs, especially if you could get him for cheap. Justin, what'd you find?
Yeah, so the official rule is you cannot win the lottery more than twice in a 5-year period, and any lottery wins prior to 2022 will not count. Prior to 2022.
So 2022
so Montreal
counts.
could win it. Yeah, 2022 counts, so Montreal could win it twice next year.
They could win. Okay, they could. You can win it 2 times. Okay,
Yep.
Just not 3. Okay, so yeah, I mean, Well, that's it's all the reason to tank. It's all the reason you need. Connor Bedard right there.
My goodness, is he going to rip it up?
Right. All right, let's go to the Ottawa Senators. We'll get to the Stanley Cup, runner-ups to close out the show. The Ottawa Senators, I think, are probably one of the teams in the NHL that they were like, the rebuild is over, all we care about is wins, and they still sucked. And here we are. Owner passed away. There's seemingly behind the scenes a lot of changes. I know they went and they hired 2 new assistant general managers very recently, and they are kind of in this position. They've got a lot of young guys knocking at the door, and really they need to figure out their goaltending situation with Matt Murray. But I think this is just a team that you just kind of you unlock the door and you see what they can do.
Yeah, really, that's it, right? Let the young guys go and see what happens. I mean, guys like, Josh Norris, Tim Stützle, Colin White, Drake Batherson, they've got a lot of good young talent here, not to mention Brady Tkachuk, who is an absolute legend after his fandom in Calgary for his brother there.
And you've got Drake Batherson, who was putting up a point per game until he got hurt last year. That cheap play. Josh Norris is poised to have a huge season this next year. Maybe definitely playing in the top 6. I mean, he had 55 points in 66 games. This guy's only going up from here. Ottawa is going to be a fun team to watch. As a Leafs fan, I'm mildly terrified.
Yeah, right. The goaltending situation to me is the biggest concern. Anton Forsberg is going to be a good 1B, but Matt Murray, can he get close to something, right, to where he used to be? That's a concern for me, but yeah, they should be fun, and maybe they're willing to spend some money, right? Maybe they go out and say, you know what, we need a piece to put us over the top. We need that one guy, and maybe they make a play on a guy like Philip Forsberg, right, who I think would fit in with what this team's dynamic is very, very well. And I mean, granted, he is a 40-goal scorer, so you'll find a place for him. You'll move some money, do whatever you can, or maybe bring in a guy like Evgeny Malkin and put you over the top there. I think either one of those guys would be phenomenal and really give this team that next step. Now, I do think they do need another top pairing defenseman on this team as well. So Thomas Chabot can't play 45 minutes a night anymore. Maybe try to spread that around a little bit.
Artem Zub looked really good last year, but yeah, they need to. And Jake Sanderson coming up. I think they probably trade Brandstrom here in the offseason. But yeah, their defense is my biggest concern. Is do they have an NHL defense outside of Chabot, really? Because Jake Sanderson, only 19 years old, you're not expecting him to come in and play 25 minutes a night. So I think, and he hasn't even played an NHL game yet, so we don't even know if he'll make the team. So
very true.
That's a huge question mark. But they have the beginnings of a very, very good team. They're very young and ready to roll. It'll be exciting to watch them. As of today, they have $23 million in cap space, and no one of like huge significance to sign other than Josh Norris, who will probably get Norris. I'm guessing will get somewhere in the neighborhood of like $6 million, and they'll sign him probably to a good little bridge deal here. That would be my guess, just to kind of see where he posits long term. Okay, let's close it out with the Tampa Bay Lightning, since we're at an hour and 15 minutes. We'll close this one out with the runner-ups to the Stanley Cup, and I mean, they re-signed the Lightning have already re-signed Nick Paul to a 7-year. I think it's a $3.15 million cap hit per year. Does this remind you a little bit of the Abdelkader deal? Or the Franzen deal?
Listen, I love Nick Paul's game, and I thought he was phenomenal for that Tampa team. My only concern with him, and I think long-term it's going to get even more of a concern, is his lack of speed, right? We saw with Colorado how they were able to just, hit the gas and he couldn't keep up, right? So maybe he drops a couple pounds. Maybe he figures out his skating a little bit better. But at 27, I don't think that's really going to happen.
No, he's only going to slow down.
Right. I think he is what he is at this point, and Tampa knows that, right? They obviously like what they see out of him, and so maybe you put a couple other speedy guys with him to kind of offset that a little bit. But Nick Paul's a guy who's a Swiss Army knife. I mean, he can go play second power play. He can move up and down your lineup. He can take faceoffs. He plays the wing. So I like his game, and I would have liked to have signed him as a Red Wing fan. I think he would have been great on a third line for you. But, again, the money they're giving him and the cap situation they're in, it kind of seems like they're expecting him to be a little bit more than just a third line guy.
Well, they gave him such a long-term deal because they're trying to, obviously the Lightning are eventually going to, they're not going to be contending for a Stanley Cup in all 7 of those years. And they know that. So I think they're looking at this like Stamkos has 2 years left here. He'll re-sign, of course, but then you're looking at a Stamkos who's 35 years old at the end of that deal. I think you're looking at the next 2 or 3 years, and you're saying, "Who cares? We'll figure it out for those last 3 years of that Nick Paul deal." But for now, Nick Paul will be great for the next 3 years, and we'll see what happens when he pushes 30. But you're doing everything you can to keep winning right now. That's what you got to do, and that's what you're going to do, which unfortunately is the reason why they have to trade Ryan McDonagh.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? I mean, look, they've got Alex Killorn. You hear his name rumored too as being a potential cap casualty to get moved.
He was terrible in the playoffs.
Well,
didn't score a goal.
Not scoring a goal aside, he was still good, but he didn't contribute, in that way, right? He was still called on defensively.
4 points in 23 games. That's not a guy making $4.5 million, which it's weird because he had a really good year goal scoring. He scored 25 goals.
It was weird, but defensively he was phenomenal, right? I mean, he and Cirelli went out there and paired up against each team's top line and managed to play really, really good. So not going to knock him all that aside, but yes, at $4.4 million, he's just not worth it right now. So, I don't think there's going to be a lot of teams lined up to trade for this guy, especially because he has a modified no trade clause, so he can just rule out 16 teams. So he's going to be difficult to move. Now, a guy like Ryan McDonagh, I can tell you right now, I think there's probably a good 28, 30 teams that'll line up to take him at this point. So even though he has a modified or a no trade clause right now, I think Tampa can still find a way to go to him and say, hey, you know what, we got to move you. He's got 2 cups here. So, I think he'll be more than willing to help the team out, hopefully. And
I think that they'll probably say, wait, where do you want to go? We'll try to help you go there.
Yes, That's exactly what it's going to come down to. And they'll take a 5th-round pick, 4th-round pick, who knows, just to get it done, because really they want to re-sign Andre Palat, right? This guy's, a franchise player. He's just been, phenomenal for this team. And so I think they don't want to lose that.
Honestly, though, I think that it might be their fatal mistake. I think that the years that they won, they were still willing to all right, well, we gotta do what we gotta do. We gotta jettison some guys, and they let Barclay Goodrow go. They let Blake Coleman leave. They didn't try and dismantle the rest of the team. And you know what? I don't know, Andre Palat. I feel like between Palat and Nicholas Paul, you're looking at exactly what the Los Angeles Kings did. The Los Angeles Kings overpaid for players that helped them win the cup, and then they live to regret it because they overpaid for guys that now Palat maybe Palat not so much as Paul in terms of regret, but Palat is 31 years old. I mean, he could very quickly go from being a very relevant player to quickly being a guy who's, he put up almost 50 points. We'll see, he's a 50-point guy. You don't want to pay Andre Palat too much here, and for too long.
Right, and they have to be careful because they've got Eric Chernak and Sergachev coming up that both need new deals, and these are top 4 guys for them right now. Especially if you get rid of Ryan McDonagh, Sergachev's value just goes even goes up even more. So you've got to tread carefully if you're Tampa Bay here, especially with that Palat deal too.
Yeah, and man, I don't know who's more important to your team, Palat or McDonough. I know Palat scored some big goals, but McDonough plays a lot of minutes. And
me personally, I'd keep McDonough if it was me.
Yeah, I think so too. And but I would try to trade Killorn and say, Palat, just we'll sign you to 4 years at $5 million. I think that they could swing that. They could make it work.
Yeah, but I will tell you this: Tampa's not done. I still think they're going to push. A lot of teams might look at them now the way they lost to Colorado because they weren't as fast. They might go, hey, you know what? This is the end of Tampa. It's hardly the end. I think they're going to be competitive for the next 2 or 3 years still. Especially with, they've got guys like Kucherov still signed long-term. Braden Point's only 26. Sorelli's 24. They're not going anywhere.
No, they're not going anywhere, but I could see a year where an early exit this next season. Just they've just played so much hockey.
But the thing, too, we forget, Tampa's going to be a team that's not going to give a crap about the regular season either. So, they might end up finishing third or fourth in that division and still make the playoffs and then turn it on. So,
yeah, all right, we'll see. All right, that is the Atlantic Division. We'll see what happens here in the draft coming up in just 5 days, and we'll try and check out the other divisions here for you before the draft. But if we're not able to, we'll just do it after the draft too. So stay tuned. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
He could come in and play with guys like Tyler Bertuzzi or Jacob Barana, and I think he would continue to thrive.
Yeah, I don't know that Detroit would be his first option coming into free agency right now based on where the Red Wings are, but
maybe Colorado, right? There's a team that could, if Nazem Kadri doesn't sign for less than 8, he would fit in really well with them.
He would. Maybe Washington.
Yep, absolutely.
Fit well in Washington. I mean, the idea of maybe getting to play with Alexander Ovechkin, that could be very attractive.
Yeah, and maybe a lot of teams aren't willing to shell out big term for him and big money, so maybe he takes a 1-year prove-it-again deal with Washington and cashes in.
I don't think so. I don't think he's signing any 1-year deals. Based on,
I don't disagree with you. But.
Based on he's at least he's been pretty consistent the last couple years. Once he's had this opportunity and just what he proved in the playoffs, he'll and it might be more like a 3-year deal, take you to 30. 3,
sure.
Maybe a 4 if he can. It depends on who you sign with. If you want to sign with a team that wins, and that's like a good team right now, yeah, you're going to have to probably sign maybe a 2-year deal, 3-year deal worth like $3 million, $4 million. But if you want to go to Detroit, Detroit will probably have to sweeten the offer and offer 5 years and like 5 times 5 for Andrew Kopp. I think would be a reasonable deal and would set Detroit up. Like he's going to be good in 5 years. Or we'll say when Detroit is really ready to compete for a playoff spot in probably another year or 2, he'll still be good.
Yep.
All right. Last team in the Metropolitan Division, the Carolina Hurricanes. What do you think Carolina is going to do going into this offseason? Because it just seems like they just can't get over the hump. No matter what that hump is, they just can't get over it. And
and I think you and I talked about this, right, during our playoff series wrap-up. I think they need a big superstar-type forward to really get this team over the hump. And maybe they picked a good year because they have some money to spend, right? I mean, they've got a guy like Martin Necas who I've heard is taking calls, right? His agent is reaching out to teams to possibly move him. So we may not see him back in Carolina this year. I don't know. I don't know why they decided to give Koke Niemi all that money. I think that was stupid, but whatever. They're going to hope he pans out. He's only 21, so there's still plenty of time for him to develop and maybe pay off on that contract. But with Vincent Trocheck, Nino Niederreiter, Max Domi, all those contracts coming off the books, they've got $19 million and change to spend, and really all they need to do is sign a couple, sign that one big forward, and then figure out Anthony DeAngelo or another top 4 defenseman there. So this could be a guy or an opportunity for them to bring in a guy like a Philip Forsberg, Johnny Gaudreau, I mean, I don't think he signs in Carolina, but Carolina is a team that's ready to compete for a Stanley Cup, and they're right there. So, they have a lot of different directions they could go in as far as where they want to spend their money, how they want to fill in those missing pieces. But I do think like I said, a game-changing forward would work really well. Maybe they go out and they make a move, make a trade, bring in a guy like Brock Besser who could potentially be out in Vancouver. Maybe bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois, right, who is rumored to wanting to go to free agency and test that market. So maybe Winnipeg deals him now. Really don't know. So
I mean, you're also don't forget about Seth Jarvis, who had a monster rookie season in his draft year, mind you. He's 20. He was 2020 pick. As a 20-year-old, I mean, he went and he had 40 points in 68 games, almost had 20 goals. He had a really good playoff too. He had 8 points, and I think you're going to see him take another step. And he's somebody who can really, I mean, he's kind of going to be that Jordan Staal leaves, and you can just drop Seth Jarvis right in there, and you've got a faster version of Jordan Staal. But yeah, I mean, in terms of free agents going to Carolina, it's one of those places that seems to be difficult to attract high level free agents. It's kind of like Columbus, right? Like it's been in the history of this organization, it's been difficult. Add on to that their owner is very stingy. I think it's going to be real tough. It's going to be real tough to draw those guys in who are like, I could go home. I could be really close. Like, I could be in Philadelphia or New Jersey for like a Johnny Gaudreau, sign a big deal, or sign back in Calgary. That is always a possibility too. I like Philip Forsberg. To me, I think it's probably more likely that he ends up back in Nashville than it does him going to Carolina. Like, Carolina is not going to be the team that goes out and goes, yeah, pay $10 million for that guy, bring him in. I just don't see it. I don't see it. They were offering, what did they offer Dougie Hamilton? I think it was like they were trying to get him for $7 or like $6.5 million.
$7,
and he signed for $9. Like, and they didn't want to give him the max term, I don't think either. So, I mean, you're just not going to get these guys if that's how you're going to value them. So they're going to have to acquire guys like, I mean, Pierre-Luc Dubois. That's a good target because he has to go there. I don't think that Pierre-Luc Dubois is getting like $10 million in free agency either. So you're going to be able to keep him cost controlled for a little while. But the Carolina Hurricanes, they're just missing something that's not getting them over the hump. Some of it, I think, was goaltending. The fact that that Anderson was hurt when push came to shove, which I said would happen. Said that would happen. I knew it would happen. I knew it would happen. Every Leafs fan knew it would happen. Oh, time to rely on him? Yeah, he's going to hurt his groin. Yeah. That's just what's been happening to Frederik Andersen, and it's unfortunate. He's a great guy. He's a really good goalie. But he just cannot stay healthy through the course of a whole season, and more importantly, when it counts. But any other players that you targeted for Carolina or things you've got going on with them?
Boy, so what I will tell you, I'm sure you probably already knew this, but as of yesterday, their AHL affiliate, the Chicago Wolves, won the Calder Cup. So I think there's some talent there as far as, guys you can bring in for the bottom six. But, maybe, again, if you're trying to make a big move to bring in a top forward, which I think this team desperately needs, you could throw in a guy like Jack Drury, who looked pretty good in the Calder Cup. He basically finished third on his team in scoring with 24 points in 18 games and, was big for this team. And, again, there's some pieces there. But ultimately, I just think they need to figure out what they're going to do as far as the forward group is concerned, because I want them to spend the money. I want them to go out and bring in a big name piece, because this is a team that I think has the right pieces right now to compete, especially because, Jordan Staal is going to be a free agent after this year. And the way he plays the game, I don't know how much longer he's going to be really good outside of the faceoff circle. So you might want to take advantage of that now. And then, again, You've got Teuvo Teravainen, who's only got 2 years left on his deal. So the window is small. Same with Sebastian Aho, right? 2 years left on his contract. Now, I do think he re-signs with them. I think they'll get something done with him and not let him walk. But maybe it is a guy like Matthew Barzal, right? Maybe you look at it and, come July 13th, they're like, hey, are you going to re-sign? And he says no. And so maybe you throw in all your marbles, right? You throw a guy like Jack Drury. You throw in a guy, Martin Nicias. Maybe you throw him in there and you give the Islanders some quality pieces that could go in and fill in those gaps for them too.
Yeah, I mean, no matter how you cut it, you've got a guy who can score goals in Svechnikov. You've got Sebastian Aho who can just burn. They have a good top six. They've got some good pieces on defense. There's just something holding them back. Like, the other thing is that Anthony DeAngelo is not signing a $2 million deal or whatever he was just coming off of.
No, yeah, definitely not.
So $1 million, one times one. He is going to get paid. He got 51 points in 64 games. Had a really nice playoff too. I mean, they're going to need to give him some big money if they want him to stay beyond this, because he is arbitration eligible. I did hear that Ethan Bear was going to be moved.
Yeah, they're looking at maybe it's his agent then instead of Martin Nicias's that's been talking to other teams.
Oh, yes, yeah. It is Ethan Bear. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because again, I think, Brendan Smith, Ian Cole, you could bring either one of these guys back in to play as a 6-7 defenseman. I think both of them played fairly well for their roles in the minutes they were given. But a guy like Ethan Bear but a guy like Ethan Bear he's just not in your long-term plans, right? So might as well just move him. He's still an RFA, young enough where you're still going to get a decent return. Pesce, Slavin, those guys are obviously your top two. And, Anthony DeAngelo, you would love to get him re-signed and maybe at a reasonable cost too. Maybe you get him at like a 6x6 or something. But, it's hard to justify paying him more than a guy like Jacob Slavin because,
But when Jacob Slavin signed his deal, it was a different time.
Oh, sure.
I don't think you can look at that. He's not paid high enough to look at him and go, "Oh, we can't pay anyone more than Slavin."
Oh no, I agree. But what I mean by all that is Carolina, as tight as they hold their purse strings, that's their leverage, right? They're going to say, well, we don't want to pay you more than our top defenseman, so we have to keep you relatively close or under that, and so maybe that's not for DeAngelo, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's possible. Vince Trocheck, do you think he's back? Think he re-signs?
That's a tough one. I think there's a place for him in Carolina.
Oh, he had a good season, 21 goals, 51 points, and he had his best year since 2017-18. I think that it's clear he's a good fit there. And I think that Rod Brindamore's really worked with him to, he's a little undersized, but he's really worked with him to help him defensively. And I think that that's allowed his game. I mean, you just look at his plus minus. I mean, he's been negative every single year, and then this year is a plus 21. I mean, that's not by accident.
No. But so the thing is guys that have put up 50 or more points at the center position. I mean, honestly, free agent wise, there's maybe 6 guys there.
Yeah.
So if you're Vincent Trocheck, you could probably go out and get paid a lot more money on a different team than you would, staying in Carolina. So it's really, the decision is, do you feel comfortable taking less money and staying here to compete for a Stanley Cup, or would you rather go somewhere else where you can possibly get a few more, $1 or $2 more million, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There really isn't, in terms of how many points he actually put up, there really isn't many other players that compare to him on the market. You've got Nazem Kadri, and I'm not even going to include Bergeron because Bergeron he's only signing in Boston, so it hardly counts, and he has so much experience. Maybe you consider Giroux a centerman. At this point, I think
Absolutely.
He's probably more of a winger in terms of what team's going to sign him. And then it's like Andrew Kopp. And Andrew Kopp isn't even a true center. He's not playing center all the time. He's kind of getting tossed around. And then maybe the other one's it's Strome. Well, Strome's a winger. Yeah, so there really isn't much.
Yeah, Ryan Strome played center and
yeah.
Kopp was on the wing. But still, those guys they can play on the wing, they can play center. So they, again, there's only a few of them, right? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
So he could cash in, right, with a team that, is really looking to solidify a number 2 or maybe number 3 center position.
Yeah, maybe paying him 6. 6 would probably be the limit for a Trocheck.
Yeah, and I think if you're Carolina, right, you're not giving him more than, I don't know if I'd want to give him more than $5 million. So,
and at 28 years old, you're probably looking at like 5 times 4.
Yeah, at the most, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, so that's a tough sell. I mean, I think that he's a good fit there. He has a good role, and like you said, he's playing good under Rod Brindamore. I guess it also depends on what else they're able to bring in. So I think this division is like every team in this division is going to get better outside of maybe Columbus. I think that's probably the one team you're looking at and you go, I don't know. Maybe the other team I could see would be the Islanders. I could see the Islanders taking yet another step back and going, oops, yep, actually last year wasn't a fluke. We just aged out.
Well, it's funny, the Islanders, right? You look at this team and they just started off really rough. I mean, they didn't really play at home till
20 games
it seemed like the last game of the season. But, I think with Barry Trotz gone, right, that's where I look at the Islanders possibly slipping, especially with whatever happens with Matthew Barzal. If they can't get him re-signed, they decide to move him. Who knows? I mean, obviously, I think he'll play out this year, being an RFA next season. So, for me, I think the Islanders, yes, I completely agree. I think they're poised to take a step back. I think Columbus is.
And maybe Washington will probably take a step back, but they're still a playoff team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Pittsburgh and Washington are still potentially playoff teams, but I think because they're getting a little older, their core is, and a little uncertainty for both teams in goal, whether that's Pittsburgh's number 1B slot and Washington trying to find a starter here. Some of those wins they're getting are probably going to go to teams like New Jersey and Philadelphia. So, whether or not any of those teams fail to make the playoffs again is another story. But I still think the cream of the crop, right, is Carolina and the Rangers, I think, right here at the top.
Yeah, and, I think this division will be tighter. You're not going to see you look at the teams that made the playoffs and the teams that didn't as a 16-point gap. I don't think you're going to see that again, 4-5. It's going to be a much tighter division. I also don't think you're going to see where every playoff team in the East had 100 points. That was an interesting year for sure. All right, well, that's the Metro Division. Justin, we went for an hour and 38 minutes on the Metro Division.
Ooh, we'll have to shorten that up here.
Yeah, we'll shorten it up for the other divisions, but that's all right. I don't mind. So we'll likely do the Pacific Division next, and then we'll hit the Atlantic and the Central, and then we'll be at the draft coming up on July 7th. So just about less than 2 weeks to the draft. So I'm
excited.
Yeah, it'll be real fun. All right, Justin, you have a good rest of your day. And to our listeners, thank you for listening. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Leave us a nice review wherever you're listening to, and have a great rest of your day.